Go.
I know. Okay.
Go.
I am going to go, and I'm just about to start because I want to welcome everyone. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Janine Kitson, independent for Bradfield, and I welcome you to my very first Bradfield Can Do Better webinar. This year is going to be a really important year because whoever wins the 2022 election will decide the future of Australia. They will decide the future of how Australia deals with the climate emergency, political integrity, and the survival of the ABC that underpins our democracy. Let me begin by acknowledging the Darramurrugal and Darug people on whose land I meet tonight and pay my respects to their elders past, present and future, and to all First Nations people wherever they may be. I just want to make the point that Bradfield is an electorate that holds incredibly precious Aboriginal heritage that is thousands of years old. Just alone in the Ku-ring-gai Chase National Park, which is in the Bradfield electorate, there is over 800 Aboriginal sites recorded. Bradfield also includes many Aboriginal place names, such as Kalara, meaning always there, Turramurra, meaning big hill, Warrawee, meaning stop here, and Wurrunga, meaning our home. Now, let me outline tonight's program that is being recorded and will later be placed on the Bradfield Can Do Better.org website. Tonight, we will cover Bradfield's background, election results, when the election might be held, and then we'll have a short break for questions and discussion. We will finish by stressing how important you are as volunteers to help with the campaign, and then about our really two exciting webinars coming up, one with Kerry O'Brien on the 1st of February, and our second volunteers webinar, which really hopes to kick off the volunteer program for the campaign. And as always, we finish with a creative conclusion, and this time it's going to be a federal election quiz set to music. So let's begin. Bradfield is the federal electorate named after Dr. John Joe Crew Bradfield, the chief engineer who supervised the design and construction of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. This photo is Dr. Bradfield and his wife Edith at the opening of the Sydney Harbour Bridge in 1932. And I just want to make a note. Edith is quite significant too, of course, because it was Edith who answered the door at her home in Gordon when a distressed neighbour called on her, distressed that the council were dumping rubbish into the pristine creek below their home. That neighbour was Annie Wyatt, and thanks to Edith Bradfield's encouragement, Annie Wyatt held her first public meeting that formed the Ku-ring-gai Tree Lovers Civic League, and then went on to form the National Trust in Australia. So I want to tell you a little bit about the background now of Bradfield. Billy Hughes was Bradfield's first Liberal member. And many of you will know that he was also the Australian Prime Minister during the World War I years and up to 1923. And Billy Hughes was known as the Little Digger because he was very committed to compulsory military service in World War I.
Yes, well, the photo's not there. Yeah.
In 1915, he was the Labor Prime Minister, but his commitment to compulsory conscription caused a split in the Labor Party, and a year later he resigned from the Labor Party, and but he held on to power as the Prime Minister and headed the new Nationalist Party, which merged with the Liberals. His government was re-elected with a large majority in 1917 and 1919, and but the Australian people rejected his push for compulsory military conscription at the two referendums. Now, Billy Hughes was 58 years in state and federal politics. He was there for a long time. And when the Bradfield electorate was created in 1949, he stood for it, and aged 84, yes, 84 years old, he became Bradfield's first Liberal member. He died in the position, and this caused a by-election, which was strongly contested by 5 independents. And it is the closest time that the Liberal Party have ever come to losing the seat of Bradfield. Now, that 1952 by-election was won by a Liberal member, Harry Turner, who had previously served as a New South Wales Member of Parliament in the seat of Gordon. Now, why I'm telling you this is that Harry Turner was a man of principle and was known to have put his conscience and constituents first before voting for the Liberal Party. And following Harry Turner's was the next Liberal member was David Connolly, who lost his pre-selection to Dr. Brendan Nelson, and then Dr. Brendan Nelson lost the Liberal Party leadership to Malcolm Turnbull, who in turn lost the Liberal Party leadership to Tony Abbott, who in turn lost the Liberal Party leadership and being Prime Minister to Malcolm Turnbull, who in turn lost the Liberal Party leadership and being the Prime Minister to Scott Morrison. The merry-go-rounds of politics. But I digress. Back to Brendan Nelson, member for Bradfield. After losing the Liberal Party leadership, he resigned as the member for Bradfield, and a by-election was called in 2009, and Paul Fletcher was elected, and he has been the member till today. I might say that Paul Fletcher, before contesting the Bradfield electorate, had a go at standing for Liberal pre-selection in Cook, and that was a very controversial pre-selection battle, but one that eventually elected Scott Morrison into the 2007 Parliament, and who today, as we know, is the current Prime Minister. So in its own way, Bradfield has had a few twists and turns on Australia's political history. So, where is the Bradfield electorate? The Bradfield electorate is in northern Sydney. It includes 4 New South Wales state electorates: Hornsby, Ku-ring-gai, Davidson and Willoughby, which is the seat held by the former New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian. Bradfield has 3 local government areas: Hornsby, Ku-ring-gai and Willoughby. So looking at this map, you can appreciate that Bradfield is a large electorate extending from Castle Cove in the south to Asquith in the north. The challenge for an independent is enormous. There are over 100,000 voters. It covers 101 square kilometres. There are approximately 30 polling booths to cover on election day, and that's from 8 a.m. in the morning to 6 p.m. at night, and 4 major pre-polling centres on the preceding 2 weeks before the election, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So let's begin by looking at the 2 party preferred Bradfield election results in 2016. In 2016, the Liberal Party received 71% of the vote and Labor 28%. Now let's look at the 2019 Bradfield election results, again on a two-party preferred basis. There was a 4.5 swing against the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party received 66% of the vote and Labor received 33%. So basically, the Liberal Party receives 2/3 of the vote and Labor 1/3 of the vote on a two-party preferred basis. Now let's look at that same 2019 two-party preferred rolls, just in a different format. Again, you can see the Liberal Party received 66% of the vote and Labor 33%, with that 4.5 swing. If you look at the actual numbers of the votes, two-party preferred, Liberals received nearly 64,000 votes and Labor 32,000 votes. Now let's look at the first preference results. Liberal Party received 60% of the vote, or about 58,000 votes, with a 0.8% swing against the Liberal Party. Labor Party received 21% of the votes, or about 20,000 votes, and a 4.2 swing towards them. And the Greens Party received 13% of the vote, or about 12,000 votes, with a 2% swing towards them. Now, as a former teacher, looking at these results, I might say 60% is an average result. It is a pass, it is a clear majority, but it is not an indication of excellence. Liberal Party Paul Fletcher won comfortably, but not resoundingly. So yes, perhaps Bradfield is a very safe Liberal seat, but the margin has declined from 21% to 16%. So now let's move on and talk about when will the 2022 election be held. The federal election is called when the writ is issued. So what is the writ? The writ is the instruction to the Australian Electoral Commission to hold an election. And this happens when the Prime Minister goes to the Governor-General to tell him that he wants to call the election. The minimum number of days between when the writ is issued till election day or polling day is 33 days, about 5 weeks. It is an incredibly short time and a huge challenge for an independent to man 4 pre-polling booths and about 30 polling booths on election day. Now let's look into more of the detail about the timing of the election. As I've told you, the time between the issue of the writ and election day is 33 days, about 5 weeks. The timing for the close of nominations is even tighter. The minimum number of days between the writ and the close of nominations is 10 days. So effectively, when the federal election is called, I, as an independent, only have 10 days to get my nomination form completed, and this requires 100 Bradfield residents to sign my form. This form only becomes available when the writ is announced. This is why it is so important for you, if you are a resident of Bradfield, to sign up onto my website and say you will be ready to sign my nomination form when the election is called. Once I am approved as a candidate, I then only have 5 days to get ready for the 4 major pre-polling election booths that will be open Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 for about 2 weeks. I also only have 23 days or about 3 weeks, to get ready for polling day or election day, which means filling volunteer rosters 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. for 30 polling booths in the electorate. This is incredibly important. When people come to vote, often they do not know who to vote for. Having a significant presence at the polling booths makes a huge difference. Now, let's look at the election timetable. When will the 2022 federal election be called? There are 12 possible Saturdays when the election can be called between the 5th of March and the 21st of May. Why? Because the federal election has never been held in January or February. There is no legal reason for not holding an election during these 2 months, but federal governments are reluctant to force people to consider politics during their summer holidays and return to work. However, we can expect New South Wales state by-elections, possibly to be held on the 12th of February, with the resignation of 4 or 5 New South Wales state MPs, including the member for Willoughby, who resigned when the Independent Commission Against Corruption revealed it was investigating whether the Premier had breached the public trust or encouraged corrupt conduct. Saturday, the 5th of March, is the earliest date that the election may be held. And some political commentators are talking about a March election. If it is, well, we must prepare for it now. Saturday, the 12th of March, is the long weekend in ACT, South Australia, Tasmania, and Victoria. It is also the Saturday when there will be International Women's Day marches across the nation's capital cities at a time when women's justice in relationship to harassment, violence, and economic inequality is more prominent than ever. Saturday, the 9th of March, is when the South Australian state election is due. However, that election can be deferred so as not to clash with a federal election. And on Tuesday, the 29th of March, the government has indicated it intends to hold a budget and as such has issued its parliamentary sitting calendar for the preceding weeks. However, there is no guarantee that this will happen as the government can change these dates. Saturday, the 2nd of April, is a possible election date if the parliamentary sitting weeks are cancelled. Saturday, the 9th of April, is not a good day as governments tend to avoid elections during school holidays. Saturday, the 16th of April, is highly unlikely as it is Saturday Easter. Saturday, the 23rd of April, is highly unlikely because it is the Anzac long weekend. Saturday, the 30th of April, includes school holidays and pre-polling during the Anzac weekend. And then that leaves May, where there are only 3 possible dates left to hold the 2022 election: the 7th of May, 14th of May, and 21st of May. So you can see it is quite a difficult challenge to know when the election will be held, but this really does give you some background to when it can happen. And I'm just going to finish now by reminding everyone about the voting paper. For the House of Representatives, that's to stand as the member for Bradfield, the ballot paper can only be valid if voters put a 1 in the box beside the candidate of their first choice, 2 in the box beside the second choice, and then they must number every box to make a valid vote. So I hope you've enjoyed some of the background and complexities about the upcoming federal election, but I think we're all a little bit tired now and we need a break. You know, if you'd like to ask a question, put your hand up in the chat box or raise your hand, and Wayne, if you could help, because I can't see everyone, they may like to ask their question. So I might, anyone?
Can't see anyone waving.
Okay, well, I'll start with the first question. Is Bradfield a safe Liberal seat? Well, yes, it is a safe Liberal seat, but there is potential, and that's the potential we have to use, and we must persuade voters to make their vote count. And I think really harnessing the power of volunteers, we need 100 volunteers to nominate me. Multiply that 10, that's 1,000. If we have 1,000, multiply that 10, that's 10,000. 10,000 times 10 is 100,000. So it is possible. Another question. Why is the 22 federal election so important? Well, I think we all know why it's important, and that's why I'm standing, because the climate emergency that we are faced is extraordinarily dire. We must act now to drastically reduce our emissions. The Liberal National Party has failed the Australian people by its track record of climate inaction. The Liberal National Party have failed on integrity by not fulfilling their promise to implement a strong federal anti-corruption commission. And the Liberal Party, National Party, have failed to uphold one of the most respected and loved national institutions in Australia, the ABC. The LNP have attacked, defunded the ABC and undermined its independence. The Liberal Party still have the 2018 Liberal Party conference resolution to privatise the ABC. And when the LNP was first elected in 2013, they promised unequivocally that they would not cut the ABC's budget. They did. There are massive budget cuts, and they can no longer be trusted. So I think there are no other questions.
Oh, yes, sorry. Janine, I've got a question.
Yes, Lindsay.
How does a ballot paper work? You mentioned you've got a number each square. Does that apply even if you just vote, say, one for you? But so you must number every square on the ballot paper for the reps?
Yes. So you can't just write one or two. You have to complete it to the end of the numbers according to how many candidates there are. And we don't know how many candidates there will be until the close of nomination. So once the close of nomination is declared by the Australian electorate, we all know how many people there are, and then every vote to be valid has to go 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, according to the number of candidates. And if they don't, it becomes an invalid vote.
How do the preferences work then? If we vote one for you and two for Anne or something like that, does that flow through to somebody else when the votes are counted? Yeah.
So the election have preferences. So exactly if I get so many votes and it's exhausted, whoever puts a number on that ballot paper, that vote will flow to that person. And I guess that's the two preferred votes, which is what I showed earlier. And what I'm hoping to do at the webinar in March is really look at those preferences in a little bit closer.
Yep.
Sorry, I just about that, Janine, you pointed out last night an interesting thing is that it's very unlikely that Fletcher will get less than 50. Right. In which case the preferences are just not going to matter.
Yeah. You have to get a maximum number. So if Paul Fletcher has 60,000, basically he's won straight out without any preferences. Yeah. But the preferences are then added later, and his numbers go up as a result of that. So it's really, very important to get that huge number towards the 50,000 if you are really going to make an impact.
Sorry, who was the other person wanting to talk? Sorry.
Peter.
Peter. Oh, Peter Duffy.
Hi,
Right.
Peter. Yep.
The way the votes are counted is that the smallest pile of votes then get distributed, their second preferences then get counted, and they work back through the piles till they, so usually it's difficult if you've got a large number of candidates in an electorate for anyone other than number 1, 2 or 3 to get up.
Thank you, Peter. I know you're a veteran of campaigns, so that's very interesting. And I'd love to have that a bit more conversation with you about that. Thank you.
And Jeff, if you can hear me, stop sharing your screen. You keep clicking on the share screen button and I have to keep stopping. Okay.
Okay, any other questions?
What's the geographic, what's the size in square kilometres?
101 square kilometres.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I was recently in the 2020 local government elections, I was supporting a candidate here in Ipswich. The electorate there, or the division in the council there, was roughly the size of Belgium, 638 square kilometres.
Well, in Queensland, they do have big electorates. Thank you. Yes, yeah. Cassandra, I can see your hand up.
This is a comment rather than a question. I was just going to point to the importance of pre-polling, and quite possibly it will be very important in this coming election. There's been more and more people who have been voting in advance, and so you know, as part of the pre-poll process, having people there, I mean, it can be 40 or even 50%. It's getting, those numbers are really getting high now. And I think with the pandemic, we're going to find that more and more people will want to vote in advance. And so having people on those pre-poll booths, this is just for all anyone who wants to influence voters, is going to be quite a task. They have changed the rules a bit, so it won't be for as long as it was last time. I can't remember the number of days, a couple of weeks before, 2 weeks, yeah. But that's still, you know, having people every day.
Yeah, so really, thank you, Cassandra, for highlighting that. So logistically, it's just an enormous task because the pre-polling goes for 2 weeks. It's 9 to 5, and we need enormous numbers of people to be there ready to hand out. So this is the real challenge. It's great to say it's really like running a sports carnival, except we're running 30 sports carnival on the same day. So thank you for that. So I guess probably this slide really sums up what Cassandra has said about the pre-polling, and Peter has talked about the size of the electorate, and Lindsay has talked about issues of preferences. But really, ultimately, I just need a lot of people to help me. Letterboxing, just can't repeat it more. We're registering and saying you'll, you know, pencil in and stand for a couple of hours or more on election day, and maybe a couple of days on pre-polling. But there's many other jobs that need to be done. Media and social media are also incredibly important, and just being at the stations and being visible. So there's a lot to do. But I guess probably one of the exciting things is that we have got a real task ahead of us, because we've got the wonderful Kerry O'Brien being our guest speaker on the 1st of February. And really, I need help for people to really push this. He's been so generous in coming and to be the guest, and because he understands that the Bradfield electorate is really a significant electorate, because it is this electorate where the Minister for Communication, who is responsible for the ABC, is present, and that we need to make sure that the voice of the ABC is really loud and clear. So if you can help with the Kerry O'Brien webinar, letter dropping, handing out flyers, putting up posters in shop windows, please let me know, and my details are at the end of this webinar. But most importantly, emailing, phoning and telling your friends to register, trying to just keep promoting it, because it's just such an important thing to do. And that sort of leads me to my final slide, which is really about our next volunteers webinar, number 2, and that's going to be on the 1st of March. And this is really going to kick off our campaign and really have very clear roles about what needs to be done, where we need more help, and really what time suits you, and to really try and just build the volunteer base so that we can continue and really make an impact, because preparation is really everything for an independent. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So thank you everyone for joining me. Thank you, Wayne, for your wonderful support, and my team who have given me advice and support in making this webinar possible. And so I'm going to finish, but before we finish, I like to finish on a creative note. Creativity is part of hope and a bit of fun. So if you'd like to stay a bit longer, you can see if you can complete the quiz, the Bradfield Can Do Better election quiz set to music. So thank you for joining me. Good evening, Janine Kitson, Independent for Bradfield.
Is this going to be on recording so we can read it again?
Yes, I believe so.
Good,
Yeah, it'll be up on the website.
good.
Janine's disappeared.
The thing's finished. That was the end. You see.
Okay. Thanks,
Bye-bye. I'll end
Bye.
it. Bye. See you.
Authorised by Janine Kitson, Suite 1A, Level 2, 802 Pacific Highway, New South Wales, Gordon 2072.